lot different today than it did 20, 10, even 5 years ago. Our students, from every demographic at every grade level, live in a culture defined by constant, instant access to information and by connections to one another and to others around the globe. They need access to the tools and resources that put learning, collaborating, and creating at their fingertips. Our district has a 3-year strategic plan. One of the core principles driving this plan is the requirement to foster 21st century learning. 21st century learning means acquiring the skills needed for students to thrive in today's world. Skills like collaboration, digital literacy, critical thinking, and problem solving. We're implementing our plan through 3 routes: ensuring that our district staff have access to relevant, rich, powerful professional development and training, providing robust technology infrastructure and tools, and through community enrichment events, engaging our whole community as we think about where we are and where we're going. Our district must continue to focus on providing the tools, support, and resources to prepare our students to blossom in this rich culture. The goal of our 21st century strategic planning team is to make the vision reality, to explore initiatives and develop methods to ensure that we are successful in meeting the needs of our future leaders, thinkers, doers.
All right. So, like I said, we have a real treat tonight. It's all right. That's my favorite video. Will Richardson is the author of the highly ranked and read EduBlog web blog. He's messing up my presentation. All right. Yeah. And he's the author of the book Blogs, Wikis, Podcasts, and Other Powerful Web Tools for Classrooms. He is a presenter and owner of Connective Learning, LLC. He promotes the implementation of read-write technologies in K-12 classrooms. He is also an advocate for school reform, which encourages the integration of technology and learning. He was also recently named to the National Advisory Board for the George Lucas Education Foundation. He is co-owner of Powerful Learning Practice, a company that delivers job-embedded, year-long professional development to schools worldwide around the pedagogies of Web 2.0 tools. Will also lives along the Delaware River in western New Jersey with his wife Wendy and his children Tess and Tucker, of all whom are bloggers. And last winter, Doug Meering, my board member, and Dr. Crystal Ritzenthaler and myself had an opportunity to see Will speak at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Convention. And when he was done, we looked at each other and we're like, we need to bring Will to Baraboo for our community to hear him. So we set out to get him, and I think I hunted you down while you were driving to your vacation spot, and as a true tech person, he answered his cell phone. So thank you for being here tonight. That was me. So let's welcome him, please.
So I'm going to use this microphone because they're videotaping this, and I just want to make sure that the audio comes in. But thanks very much, Lori, and thanks for coming out tonight. It's really kind of interesting. As I was driving up from Madison, I felt like this was actually almost home to me, because where I live in New Jersey, it's a lot of corn, a lot of cows, and actually some hills. And I didn't know there were hills in Wisconsin, except apparently for right here. That's what I'm hearing, right? So a ski area too. How cool is that? But anyway, so thanks for having me tonight. I really just want to take a little time to go through a presentation and then open this up for just a discussion, because one of the most important parts of this is that there are a lot of really good questions that we're asking, but I'm not sure that there are any real answers to these questions, and the answers are going to come by people talking about what's happening right now. So the kind of premise of this presentation is built around the idea that we're undergoing, or we're in a moment of really big shift when it comes to learning, when it comes to what education is, and that we absolutely have to have, I think, a very different conversation around the future of schools from the one that we're having right now. That's not to say that there aren't some good things that are happening on the national level, but a lot of those conversations, I think, are just mired in a 20th century kind of lens, looking at schools and learning in a way that really doesn't exist any longer. So what I'm going to try to do is push you and challenge you and maybe make you a little bit uncomfortable in terms of what the world looks like right now. And I'm going to basically premise this talk on this TED book that just came out about a month ago. $2.99, 51 pages, ebook only, so it's really cheap and easy if you want to read it. It's basically asking the question, why school? And I'm not asking that question in the sense, why do we have school? But what's the value of school now in a world that's very, very different from the world upon which school originally was built? The idea for school came at a time that was very different from the world in which we live and the world that these kids are going to live in. And so that's the big question that we have to ask. What is the value of school right now? Why do we want our kids in school? Because the learning piece of it is exploding. It's happening in lots of different places in lots of different ways. And I'm going to make sure I go through exactly what that world kind of looks like. I was a former English teacher. I'm not sure if Lori mentioned, but I was a public school educator for 22 years in New Jersey. I taught English at a high school level for 18 years, and then was a technology administrator for 3 years. And that was about 7 years ago now. So I'm not that far removed from schools. And I get the opportunity to go in lots of schools. I've been to hundreds of different schools over the last 7 years, 7 years, in about 12 different countries. It's been a fascinating kind of tour of the world. But since I was an English teacher, and since I'm a parent of a 15 and a 13-year-old, any of you own 2 teenagers? Might be interesting. Maybe we could go have a drink later, try to figure out what that looks like. I love my children, but I have no idea who they are every morning when I wake up. I'm trying to figure out which version of my child is that's walking in the room at that particular moment. They're both in public schools out in New Jersey. My daughter's actually going to my old school. And despite the fact that actually my high school, my old high school is doing some pretty interesting things around learning, I'm a very frustrated public school parent because a lot of what I see happening in their classrooms makes me wonder how well prepared they're going to be for the realities of the world that they're going to enter. It still looks a lot like it did when I was teaching. It looks a lot like it did when I was going to school. I'll never forget about my last year of teaching. A girl walked into my room with an algebra book that was the same algebra book that I used when I was taking algebra in high school. And it stunned me, you know, and I think that basically now we have a lot of technology that we've been able to overlay onto the curriculum, but we're still teaching the same type of curriculum, and that's what's really frustrating to me right now. I'm looking for evidence that my kids are going to be prepared for the types of things that they're going to experience and have the disposition and the skills that they're going to need. So I get to quote Dickens, and I really think that Dickens wrote this quote for this moment, because I can't imagine there's been a more amazing time to be a learner in history, and I know that's a big statement to make, but I absolutely believe that. I can't imagine that we've had more of an opportunity right now to learn pretty much on demand whatever we want to learn when we want to learn it, if we have access, you know, and that access is exploding right now, and we're talking about the web more than anything else, although there are lots of technologies that are kind of built on top of that. But it's an amazing moment. I've been blogging for 11 years. I started blogging back in kind of the Stone Age of blogging, and there were only about 5 or 6 people when I first started writing online that were trying to think about how these technologies change what happens in classrooms. And now there are thousands of teachers, tens of thousands of teachers that are experimenting with these types of technologies, and all of us kind of look at each other and go, this is amazing on a lot of different levels. But then you hear the conversations that are happening in state houses and on the national level, and I've been to Indiana, and I've been to Louisiana, and I've been to a lot of places where basically what we're trying to do in the policy level is to do school better, not differently. And to me, that's a really big problem right now, because I think that trying to do what we've been doing for 100 years better at a moment of huge change and upheaval and disruption is not the right recipe for success for our kids. I think we need to have a different conversation. I think we really need to think radically different about what that all looks like. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give an example of the best of times, and I'm going to give an example of the worst of times, too, and we're kind of living at the same moment. I've had the opportunity, actually, I feel really fortunate to go down to Australia a number of times. I've been down there actually 9 times in the last 6 years. And I was down this summer when the Olympics were going on in London. And I have a friend who I've made in Melbourne. When I go down, we try to go to Aussie rules football. I don't know if you've seen an Aussie rules football game, but basically all you need to know, it's like a rugby type of thing, but it's a variation. But they have blood timeouts. They cart people off on a regular basis. It's this kind of really bruising thing that people do down there. And it's a lot of fun to go and watch and kind of take part in. So I didn't know who the teams were that we were going to go see. I wanted to kind of look them up. So I started looking at some sporting sites online from Australia, and I found this one. And I thought this one was pretty interesting. Obviously, like I said, this was during the London Olympics. They had lots of interesting stories. I'm a real sports fan, so I like different sports. I like to try to learn about what games other countries play. If any of you here can explain cricket to me, I really appreciate it. Can't figure that one out. But the writing was pretty good, and I just started digging around a little bit, and I came to the About page, and I saw that some of the reporters that were writing for the site were just out of college. Others were kind of part-timers, and yet I was really impressed with the coverage that they had. They covered all these different sports, and they were totally being updated. And the Olympics coverage was really interesting. It was really good. What surprised me was when I clicked on the editor's page. And I thought, this can't be right. You know, this can't be a 14-year-old kid who's running the site. It was a 14-year-old kid who was running the site, who at that time actually was in London covering the Olympics with a full press pass, because he had started this blog 2 years ago and built it into basically what it's turned out to be a sporting news service in Australia, believe it or not. His dad drives him around all over the place to cover these events, and he's on phones, he's talking to reporters, people who are writing for them, who are lawyers, and all sorts of stuff. It's just this amazing little thing that's happened over the last 2 or 3 years. But here's the point, not possible even a decade ago. Or maybe somewhat possible if you know code, if you know HTML, if you knew a little bit about how to publish on the web. Certainly not possible 15 years ago, right? The web's only been around for 15, 16 years. But now eminently possible by anybody who has a passion, whether they're 14 or 12 or 8 or 80. Anybody who has a passion and has a real desire to create things and publish them to the world, they can do that now if they have access. That's pretty interesting, and it's pretty different from the way things were just a few years ago. So here's the worst of times. Here's the foolish part. Anyone know the Gupta Empire? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Gupta Empire. Anyone? Okay, so, have you? You've heard of it? Oh, you taught social studies. So you might know this question, you can't answer it. Lori's got an iPad, actually, for the first person who can answer this question correctly. Which geographic factor affected the development of Gupta Empire? Island location, volcanoes, monsoons, or permafrost? Any of you know that off the top of your head? Okay, what if I said, seriously, I've got a free $25 gift certificate to the restaurant of your choice if you come up to me and give me the right answer. It has to be the right answer. What would you do right now? Yeah, you take out your phone, you take out your iPad, you take out whatever technology you have in your pocket, you do a Google search, and you try to figure out the answer to the question, right? Let me make this point. School is the only place in my kids' lives where they cannot take the technology out of their pockets or backpacks to answer the questions that they're being asked. You understand that, right? It's the only place. Anywhere else, if they were asked this question, they would look it up. They would Google it, and they would get the right answer. The right answer is, by the way, monsoons, in case you were wondering. And you better be wondering if you're 11th grader in New York, because this is a question on the state regents exam that every student in New York has to pass. And this one is very similar to the other 39 on this particular test. And it begs the question, why are we asking this question? Why are we asking kids this question? I'm not saying the Gupta Empire isn't important. It maybe is. It's not important if we're asking it like this. This means nothing. This doesn't prepare them for anything but jeopardy. That's it. And basically, this is where we're at, however, when it comes to the types of assessments, when it comes to the types of things that we're asking kids to do. The vast, or I won't say the vast, but a lot of what is on the state assessments right now could be answered with a Google search. Let kids do open phone state assessments. Why wouldn't we do that? Because that is the way that they're going to answer the questions once they leave school. So we either have to give them access to answer those questions, or we have to change the test. We have to change the assessment. It's not about whether I'm carrying around the Gupta Empire in my brain any longer in case one day I need it when I'm 35 years old and I'm in a conversation that I'll be embarrassed if I don't know that. Or the Pythagorean theorem, or the dates of the Civil War, or a whole bunch of other stuff that everyone in this room knew at one point, but if I gave you the test right now, probably most of you would fail miserably on that stuff. Because the only reason we learned it is because we needed it just in case, right? We needed it in our brains just in case it came up at some point in our lives. And I get why we did that. I understand why we did that. When content was really scarce, when content wasn't all over the place. But now the answer is everywhere. The answer to that question is everywhere in a gajillion different places, as are most of the questions that we're asking kids on tests. And look, I'm a parent, I look at my kids' tests, telling you, most of what they're being asked to recall is stuff that they can Google. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have anything in their brains. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a lot of stuff that we're spending time on right now that I'm asking, why? Why are we spending time on that stuff when there's so much other stuff or so many other things that kids could be doing right now? So welcome to it. We are at this huge moment of disruptive change. And it's not, I don't think there's ever been a moment like it. You know, a lot of people are comparing it to the advent of the printing press. But the printing press, really, the effects of the printing press really took about a century to play out. It was not something that happened very quickly. This is happening at light speed compared to that. This change that we're talking about is moving very, very quickly. And here it is, in brief. In the last 15 years, we have moved from a world of scarcity of information, knowledge, content, people, teachers, etc., to a world of absolute abundance of that stuff. We are swimming in it now. We have so much access to it that it is radically different from the world that existed just a few years ago, and radically different from the premise upon which schools were built. Schools were built because you had to come here to get the information. Information wasn't everywhere, so we bring you together, we bring kids together with a teacher, and that's basically how we decided to educate students. Now, however, that whole equation has flipped, and this is not optional, by the way. This is not something that you can just ignore or escape, and most of you know this if you're in businesses. Just about anything you do right now has been affected in some way by what access gives us in terms of information or content or teachers or whatever else. So we have an abundance of information, tools, opinions, people, data, resources, media, more. 600,000 apps in the App Store. 2.5 billion people online right now. 5 billion people by the end of this decade. Most of them coming on mobile phones in developing countries. 2 trillion web pages. 4.5 years. If you really have no life and you want to watch every video that's being uploaded in the next 24 hours to YouTube, it would take you 4.5 years nonstop. No bathroom breaks, no dinners, nothing. 4.5 years nonstop every 24 hours. Do the math on that. We are swimming in content. We are swimming in media. And it is a complex thing. This is not an easy thing to understand, but it is easy to understand how very different this is. Now you ask kids about abundance, and this is what they see, right? Games and hangouts and text and all the things that they're told to turn off when they come to school, basically. And you've heard the phrases, I'm sure. We ask kids to power down when they walk into the room. In New York City, it's so bad that kids actually are paying $1 a day to a vendor outside the door to basically check in their phones. Because they can't even bring them into the schools. Metal detectors, not looking for phones, but basically if they have phones, they get taken away. So they check them outside at a little phone cart guy. They give them $1, he gives them a coupon, and then when they come out at the end of the day, they trade the coupon in for their phone. Nice little interesting business, right? A little innovative in terms of thinking about that. But schools do not like this stuff. Schools basically do not know how to embrace this stuff. Yet when my kids come home from school, this is where they go. This is what they do. Not for 6 hours at a time, but for the hour and a half a day that I let them, this is what they do, right? This is the type of interaction that they have. Now, you can look outside of schools, you can look outside of education, you can see these changes happening really, really fast right now. You think it's different being a journalist today than it was 10 years ago? How many of you have a phone with a camera? Seriously, how many of you have a phone with a camera? You're all journalists, right? You really are journalists. If you have an app on that phone, or if you have a connection on that phone, you can take a picture, you can publish that picture, you can start writing a blog post about it. If something really bad happens, you can be reporting on it. And you see this every day. The London subway bombings a couple years ago. Earthquakes, right? People are tweeting in the midst of earthquakes. And so basically, this immediacy is changing journalism radically. Books, you think books are a little different? Sure, they're digital. I'm not talking about that. A digital book and a paper book are not that much different. It's just a different kind of delivery. But now books are becoming social. That's different. That you and I can read a book together, if I'm in New Jersey and you're here in Wisconsin, and we can share video, we can talk about it, we can act on it, we can build on it. That's different. That's really different. And that changes the nature of what a book is. And what does that change, or what is that going to look like? Who knows, right? We're still kind of playing that out. Businesses, music, Justin Bieber, anyone, right? That's all I got to say. it's a very, very different world when you can put up a really scratchy, dark YouTube video cover song of somebody and be discovered and now be the idol of, billions of teenagers around the world. That didn't happen 10 years ago. So that's really different as well. So I'll give you a couple examples of what this looks like. Anyone know Kickstarter? Have you heard of Kickstarter? Okay, so if you have a great idea for a product, but you don't want to go and get it funded in a normal way, you can now go to Kickstarter, which is a place where basically you pitch your product. You make a little video, 2-3 minutes. You say, this is my product. This is what I want to do. Here's how much money I need. And basically people like you and me go and look at these products and they go, that's really cool. I'll give you $25 for that. And basically the way it works is if I give $25 to the people who are looking to fund this really cool watch idea, then if and when they build it, I get a watch. So basically they're trying to sell me a product before it's even been built. Kind of different. So these guys had this really cool watch. They had a month. They wanted $100,000. They raised in 1 month $10,266,000. They sold 70,000 watches before they built one. Now, a little bit different for business when you can do that? I think so. Because again, we have abundant access. Now all of a sudden, our customers are everywhere. And basically, if we know how to get in front of our customers, that changes the whole value chain. It changes the whole distribution thing. It changes everything about that. Medicine is changing. Welcome to the virtual house call. And the other interesting thing is there are lots of places now where people who have certain illnesses are coming together in social places online and kind of comparing therapies, comparing prescriptions, how things are working. And we're learning a lot about what happens because of this abundant access, this ability for people to come together outside of physical spaces and interact and share and do all sorts of really interesting things with that. And music is forever changed. My daughter and I were in the basement last year before Christmas, and we were looking for some Christmas ornaments and came across a box of old record albums. You guys remember those, I'm sure. It was really embarrassing. My ABBA Greatest Hits album was on the top. Alphabetized or something, I don't know. Anyone in the room never had the pleasure of putting a needle onto a groove on a record? Raise your hand if you've never done that. I'm sure there are a couple people in the back there. It's really, really a thrill to try to get that thing right. Do you even know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you do. I had a couple people at presentations. Yeah, I'm 33, 78, 45, right? But she looked at me finally and she just said, did you really buy 12 songs to get the one song that you want to listen to? I was like, yes, I did. I had to buy all of them to get the one song that I wanted to hear over and over again. Her world is Rhapsody. Her world is Spotify. Her world is I want to listen to, Justin Bieber or whoever it is, as many times as I want over and over and over again. She could do that as long as I'm paying her $9.99 a month for unlimited, 24/7, 365 streaming of music. Totally different. Very, very, and very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to kind of wrap their brains around in terms of how much this has changed. So we now live in a world marked by ubiquitous computing, ubiquitous information, ubiquitous networks, and unlimited speed of everything, everywhere, from anywhere, and all kinds of devices that make it ridiculously easy to connect, organize, share, collect, collaborate, and publish. And raise your hand if you know a school that you would describe like this. Exactly, right? If you have access, and if you know what to do with it, and I'm not saying that everyone has access. I know there are lots of people who don't or have limited access, and I don't know why that is not more of an imperative in this country right now to get people connected. I mean, I can't imagine kids without access competing with kids who have access, especially kids who have access and know what to do with it in a learning context. But this is what the world looks like, except here. Not just here, but except in these types of places, where basically we tell kids you cannot live in this world while you're in these halls, within these walls. And as a parent right now, it's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable. That has to change. Because my kids need to understand what this means in the context of their learning and of their education. And it means something very different from the one we've been setting up. So I want to run through what some of the specific challenges that our kids face and that we face because of abundance. And the first one I want to talk about is this idea of work. How the idea of work changes because of abundance. I mean, the easy kind of example is all the businesses that are beginning to offshore a lot of their kind of data entry things, the things that they used to have in-house. My favorite story is the one where, in a lot of places, if you pull up at a drive-through window at a fast food place, your order is being taken by someone in India, believe it or not, that is connected to the computer in that place, so that the people there see what the order is and fill it. But basically, the person you're talking to is in another country somewhere because it's just cheaper and easier and more consistent to do that. So the types of jobs that we have that can be either offloaded to other people at a cheaper rate or offloaded to technology are going to be offloaded in those ways. And that's a lot. I was talking to actually a lawyer from Temple Law School who was on his way to Beijing, and he was on the plane today. And we were kind of talking about this, and he said, even lawyers are losing tons of business because they don't need to write all those contracts anymore. They don't, people go online and they just get that help online now. And some of it's really good. And there are places now you can even write law briefs and stuff online where you don't need all of the resources and all the time and everything else. So technology is absolutely changing the nature of work. A lot of people think that the kids who are in schools right now are, and I happen to agree with this piece of it, I'm not convinced that my kids are going to get jobs that have health care, that have life insurance, that have pensions, that have all the stuff that many of us expected when we were growing up. I'm not sure that stuff's going to be available because businesses love abundance in the context that if they don't need a 40-hour graphic designer and they only need 8 hours, they can get 8 hours now pretty easily by finding someone online, and they don't have to give that person all those benefits. They don't have to pay all that extra stuff to those people. So they can piece together the work that they need, which is building a huge market for freelancers, a huge market for people who are able and willing to do piecework, right? Piecemeal work, where they're cobbling together these kinds of careers. Now, again, this isn't going to be for everyone, but it's going to be for a substantial number of people. And I'm kind of cherry-picking headlines here, but, I think this is a reality that schools are kind of not preparing kids for. And, I'm going to talk about college here in a second, which is a totally different, well, not totally different, but another part of the story. There are lots of kids who are coming out of college expecting this full-time, salary job who aren't finding it. It doesn't exist anymore, and some of it is because of the economy, and some of it will come back. But a lot of it is gone for good. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a different thing. It's a different reality that we have to prepare kids for. It's not to say that our kids cannot flourish in that new reality, but we have to prepare them differently to flourish in that reality. People coming out of college right now and the kids in our schools right now, your kids better have a reputation online that is something that people want to hire. More and more people are going to be Googled over and over and over again. The kids in school right now are absolutely going to be Googled over and over and over again by college admissions officers, by future employers, by future mates. I can't imagine what it's like to be dating right now, right? You meet someone, you go, what was your name again? Excuse me for a second. Right? And you're like, that's not unrealistic. That happens. As soon as I got off the plane, I Googled that attorney that I was talking to because I wanted to see what he was about. He's really an interesting guy. And I hope I have a conversation with him again. But look, the idea is your kid, your child, or your student needs to be Googled well in this world, needs to have a reputation online. Because more and more people are hiring people off of Google searches, not resumes. They are hiring people because they're going online and asking, what can this person do? Not where did they go to school, not how many certificates do they, what can this person, where's this person's resume, and portfolio, I should say. What have they shown an aptitude or an interest or a passion for that fits with the needs that I have? Which is why I say to schools, if one of your goals is not that every child that graduates on graduation day is Googled well under their full names, that should be a goal that you have. Because if you're cranking kids out of this district that aren't Googleable well, you're basically saying to them, good luck. Good luck with that. We know that people are going to be looking for you left and right, but we can't figure out how to help you be found well online. And I know there's a piece of that that's scary. I know there's a piece of that that's really uncomfortable. But now I'm going to make you really uncomfortable. I want my own kids to be found by strangers on the internet. And I say that seriously and sincerely. The idea that they are not going to learn with people who they'll never meet in their lives is ridiculous. They're going to learn with people, they're going to learn with strangers the rest of their lives. That's the reality of this moment. And if they're not Googled well, if they're not findable by those strangers who they can do really good work with and learn from, that's a really difficult thing for them. That's going to put them behind those people that can. I'll just use myself as an example. If you tell me that I have to stop learning with all the people who I don't know, I have no idea what I would do right now. I seriously would have. You're telling me I can only learn with the people who I meet face to face? Do you know how limiting that is for me right now? Do you know what percentage of people that cuts out of my learning potential, my learning experience? Almost 95% probably. So the idea that our kids we're not going to prepare our kids for learning with people online who they'll never meet is crazy, I think. We have to do that. And because their reputation is absolutely going to be a big part of their success right now. And I'm going to give you some examples of that later on. And this, again, kind of getting back to that freelance thing, this was one study that said over 50% of people by 2020 will be independent contractors, consultants, or freelancers. They'll be kind of looking for their own work and creating their own jobs. And even if that's 25%, even if a quarter of the kids in 2020, those kids right now that I think are somewhere in 4th, 5th, 6th grade in this district right now, even a quarter of them are going to go out and start rolling their own jobs and careers and that kind of thing. Does that not change what we do in schools? Absolutely. It has to change what we do in schools. Because it's a very, very different outcome from the one that we think is going to happen for the kids who are in the school. This is, by the way, Rachel Bortzman, who has a great TED Talk, who talks about what this reputation thing is going to look like. And so here's his review stream. These are the people who are reviewing his work here, the badges that he has. These are the people who have said, I trust him, right? And basically this is a word cloud of what you find when you search for that particular person. And these are his verified ideas and all this kind of stuff. And this is a little bit out there, but it's just a little bit out there. This is not beyond reality. You can't look at this and kind of go, oh, that'll never happen. It's already happening. There are sites like Clout, there are sites like Reputation.com, all sorts of places right now that are really building businesses around this idea that you have to have a reputation. You have to be able to be transparent about what you know and what you can do, and it's really kind of different. Abundance challenges our definition of literacy, without question. So I'm going to make you feel really bad now. I'm going to show you the National Council of Teachers of English, very well-known professional organization, my own professional organization, who 4 years ago posted 6 bullet points as to what literate readers and writers in the 21st century need to be able to do. And I'll guarantee you that most people in this room are not literate by this definition, and I'll also guarantee you that the vast majority of kids who are going to graduate from this district next June or May, whenever it is, will not be literate by this definition. So here it is, ready? You need to develop proficiency with the tools of technology, and that means all sorts of technologies, right? Not just one technology. You need to build relationships with others to pose and solve problems collaboratively and cross-culturally. And the collaboratively piece here is pretty easy. The cross-culturally piece, that's where it gets interesting, right? How do we build in cross-cultural collaboration for our kids, if that's a part of what literacy is right now? Design and share information for global communities to meet a variety of purposes. Googled well. Rhetorical question, but I wonder what percentage of kids who graduate from this district next year are findable online, that they have shared information online, that they have put out their knowledge or added to the knowledge base or created things that other people have consumed or found interesting. Manage, analyze, synthesize multiple streams of simultaneous information. I mean, we could take 5 minutes just trying to figure out what that means, right? But I'll tell you what it doesn't mean: a textbook and a handout and a worksheet. Those are not multiple streams of simultaneous information. We're talking about RSS feeds and Twitter and Site and all these other types of aggregation services that bring us information just nonstop and make us feel overwhelmed. But it's not information overload, as Clay Shirky, the other guy, that guy I quoted before, says. It's not information overload; it's filter failure. That we need new filters for all the information, and that's what that's about. Manage, analyze, synthesize. Create, critique, analyze, and evaluate multimedia texts. Are we making videos? Are we creating audio? Are we putting out digital stories that people can look at? Are kids fluent at narrating stories or putting together projects using multimedia? That's a part of literacy. And then finally, the ethical responsibilities around that. And that's a huge piece of this. And we're not just talking about plagiarism and cheating and that kind of thing, but we're also talking about bullying, and we're talking about all that other stuff that goes along with that. So that's literacy. And I look at this and I can tell you that my kids will not be literate in this definition, using this definition when they graduate. Because there are things that my kids' schools are simply not getting to in this equation. And I actually, at a presentation, said, I really think that probably 80% of kids across this country are illiterate when they graduate based on this definition. And I said that at a presentation in Philadelphia a couple years ago. And Sandy Hayes, the vice president of NCTE, was in the audience and came up afterwards and said that you didn't get that number right. She goes, it's more like 95% of kids are illiterate by this definition. So it changes. When we have access to so much stuff, we can't rely on old definitions of literacy. By the way, what is reading and writing going to look like for kids who are in kindergarten, first, second grade right now? Do any of us have any clue what it's going to look like? You think it's going to look like it looks today? I don't think so. I mean, reading is going to be just this totally different experience, filled with multimedia, filled with different types of texts and whatever else. Writing, I mean, again, it's not going to be simply keying in words. In fact, some people are saying, and I don't believe this, but I don't agree with this, but some people are saying we don't need to write in text any longer because it's all going to be just kind of video. It's all going to be, this multimedia type of thing. And I don't think that's correct. But I absolutely believe that we have no clue what reading and writing literacy is going to look like in 12 years or in 15 years for the kids who are just coming to school. Changes the notion of an education, doesn't it? Back in the 50s, when at the end of the World War II, in the late 40s and 50s, we decided basically to rebuild this country based on education. And so we created the GI Bill. And some of your parents and grandparents are probably benefactors of the GI Bill, who came home from the war and who were able to get loans and were able to go to college. And what happened was we created this idea that said if you go to college, basically, and you get a degree, you have stamped your ticket to a middle-class existence in this country. If you get that college degree, you're pretty much set. And I can tell you one person who absolutely believed that, and that was my mom. My mom, basically, and I grew up the first 10 years of my life on the west side of Chicago, and then we moved to New Jersey. But my mom was making about $10,000 a year as a payroll clerk back in the mid-'70s when I was getting ready to go to college. And she kept saying, you're going to college, it doesn't matter. We were eating a lot of boiled hot dogs and instant French's mashed potatoes, which if you haven't ever had French's mashed potatoes in a packet, then you should really try that. And I kept saying, yeah, that sounds great, Mom, but how are we going to make that happen? She's like, I don't know, you're going to college. And we made it happen. I took out a loan. My dad pitched in. This is the only picture I have of my mom and dad together, by the way. It's kind of interesting. But you look at her face on my graduation day, and you know what she's thinking, don't you? Thank God. She is. She's looking at me going, thank God. He's going to be okay. He's got that diploma. Because she bought into that. She was a Swedish immigrant. And so this was the American dream come true for her, without question. I had that diploma. I was going to be okay. And I turned out okay, I think. But, the deal is now, it's a little bit different when you start thinking about what a college education gets you anymore. So here's the moment that we're at right now. We're on this upward spiral of the cost of higher education still going up. I looked at USA Today, in fact, had a report that said the price of college is still going up. It's slowing down. It only went up 4.8% last year, as opposed to 8-10% over the last, annually over the last few years. Now, when I went to college, I was down at the bottom end of that. I went to Ohio University, and I think it was something around $5,500 a year, full tuition room and board for an out-of-state student at that point, back in 1912. So, it was not that bad. It was not that onerous. But here I am, a father of a 13 and a 15-year-old, looking at this reality staring me in the face, going, man, this is a little bit different. And it is playing out in some really big ways in this country right now. $1 trillion in student debt. We just kicked $1 trillion in student debt. And most of that debt is held by about one-third of kids. So 2 out of 3 kids basically get out of college, and they don't have a lot of debt. They're not carrying a lot of that, on their shoulders. But if you have a third of kids who are coming out of college with some severe college debt, that's a big problem. And we have a big problem right now. You see stories, all the time about, there's one coming up here. And here's the other piece of it though, right now, and some of this is because of the economy, but I'm telling you, some of this is also because of the shift that we're seeing in the nature of jobs and the nature of work. A lot of kids are coming out of college, over half of our kids are coming out either unemployed or underemployed, meaning, those people with business degrees or marketing degrees or whatever else are, making lattes at Starbucks because that's about all they can find in terms of a job. And I know that you guys know some people who are in that boat or have kids who are in that boat. I know my wife's niece just graduated from Rutgers, has no job at all. Nothing. And so it's a really, really tough moment right now. And like I said, I think that some of that's going to shift as hopefully the economy gets better, but a lot of that is just going to be the way that we have to think about it. You can see kids, people kind of running from debt collectors. This is where we're getting. This woman's changed her phone number 10 times. Now, the price of an education is high because it's scarce still. Only 28% of people in this country have a college degree 6 years out of high school. That's it. 28%. And that goes up to about a third after 30 years, after they're 30 years old or whatever. But it's not like everybody in this country is going out of high school and getting a college degree. And so the price basically keeps going up because it's still a fairly scarce commodity. Now, here's the problem, though, at this moment. The price of information now is almost zero, right? In the world, when we have abundant access to all this stuff, I'm pretty much carrying the sum of human knowledge around in my pocket. And it doesn't cost me anything, except for the bandwidth that I pay for, through Verizon or whatever else. And it sometimes costs me a little bit, like the New York Times only wants me to get 10 free articles a month. And I read the New York Times, but I don't want to pay for the New York Times because I can read news from everywhere. So basically on my browser, on my phone now, I have 3 different browsers on my phone, so I get 30 different articles a month, free articles a month. And, on my computer I got 4, so I'm up to 70. You know what I'm saying, right? Now, we can have a conversation about the ethics of that. I get that. Just as we should have a conversation about the ethics of Napster and the ethics of all kind of the expectation that content is free. And look, I get it. This is having a huge impact on artists and writers. And it's a different world. It's hard to make a living anymore as an artist because of these types of things. But the reality of it is that information now, the cost of it is negligible. I can watch Al Jazeera on my phone. I don't have to pay for news any longer. Now, that is because of abundance, because it's everywhere. Now, I'm not saying that simply because we have access to information makes us educated, right? Those are 2 very different things. Access, great, I can get a whole bunch of stuff. That doesn't mean that I have any clue what to do with that information or make sense of it, or to look at the world differently or to change the world for better. But what it does mean is when you have a gap like this, really interesting innovations start to happen, and welcome to it. You cannot pick up a newspaper. Wall Street Journal today had this interesting article, and it was basically saying, do we really even need teachers in the future, right? And it was about guitar playing. It was about learning how to play guitar, and these kind of incredibly good guitar teachers who are basically setting up YouTube channels and giving away a lot of free stuff, but then having people pay for, subscriptions to their videos, or doing $100 an hour video lessons, with kids everywhere around the world. So it's kind of interesting. So here's the story from a couple months ago in the New York Times. As part of a seismic shift in online learning that's reshaping higher education, Coursera, a year-old company founded by 2 Stanford University computer scientists, will announce on Tuesday that a dozen major research universities are joining the venture. In the fall, Coursera will offer 100 or more free massive open online courses, or MOOCs, that are expected to draw millions of students and adult learners globally. And they've started, and they've drawn millions of learners. Now, if you go and dig into these MOOCs, as they're called, what you'll find is a lot of people just sign up for them and then they just kind of drop out. So even though there are millions of people enrolled in these things, most of the people aren't sticking with them. But there are now courses being taught from Stanford and Harvard that have over 5,000 active students in them, taking a college-level course for free. And the way it works is lectures are recorded, kids kind of, students watch them on their own time. They get into these kind of communities where they have discussions about the content. There's some live time that they can kind of go in. But it's a very different structure, and it's much looser, and it's not for everybody. You know, if you're taking a course expecting someone to deliver it to you, MOOCs are probably not what you want to take. But there are a lot of people in developing countries who are going, oh my gosh, I can take an artificial intelligence course from Stanford for free. Sign me up. And so there are people. There was an article the other day. If you look at Time Magazine, the cover of Time Magazine, have you seen it? It's like Rethinking Higher Education. And there's an article in there about a 12-year-old girl over, I forget exactly where, but over, you know, in like Czechoslovakia or Slovenia or someplace, that was taking a physics course from Stanford, 12 years old. And what's happened is now, so many people have said, wait, I want credit now for this work that I'm doing in these free massive open online courses. And what they're saying is, well, you can take a test and you can get a certificate. So she took the test and she passed it. She's all good. Now, what if you could get credit for this stuff? Would that change things? What if all of a sudden you could take free courses from really, really good institutions and schools around the world and get credit for it? Well, aside from this being the tsunami, welcome to it. Welcome to it. I can take a course for free from Stanford, take a test, get a certificate, and get 3 credits. Now, does that change the way we think about higher education? Absolutely. And we are just at the beginning of this, don't get me wrong. This is really, really early new stuff. But you look now, and people are looking at this and they're going, this looks really kind of interesting. And so now we have the open university, we have the peer-to-peer university, we have all of these places now where people are coming together in online courses, and they are learning the things that they want to learn when they want to learn them, and they will be getting credit for that work within the next 5, 10 years. There's almost no doubt about it. And now there are people who are saying, well, why can't we give you credit for the informal learning that you've done? Not in a college setting, not in a course setting, but in the course of your life, your life's work. Why shouldn't you get credit for that? I'll raise my hand. I've been blogging for 10 years. I've written 4 books. I've published over 1.5 million words on my blog. I deserve a PhD, right? I mean, I've done more work than any PhD program. I don't want it, but it'd be nice if someone said, hey, Will, you know what? Let me see what you've done, and I'd give to, use your PhD, right? Now, look, I mean, if I can learn on my own anytime I want, wherever I am, and I'm deeply, deeply passionate about that learning, and I'm doing good stuff, and I'm creating good things, shouldn't I get credit for that? I mean, I don't think that's a question we should dismiss. Who says I have to go somewhere to get a degree to show that I am learned or that I can do the work that I need to do if I live at a moment where I have access to so many of these opportunities? The reason we went to college originally, you know why people started colleges, right? You know why people went to college originally? For the library. That's where the information was. Harvard and Oxford, people were flocking there because that's the only place you could go to read all the books that well, guess what? That stuff's everywhere. Right? It's all over the place now. So that really changes it. Khan Academy, anyone? If you haven't heard of Khan Academy, you need to look at Khan Academy. Sal Khan, who started basically in his office just making these videos, helping out his nieces, basically learning algebra. They were having trouble. He liked math. And they started putting them up online, and other people started watching them. And then Bill Gates found him, and now he's got 3,200 videos online. And he has delivered 194 million lessons through Khan Academy. Now, here's the interesting thing about Khan, though, right? I can go and I can learn algebra at Khan. I can go through the whole thing, right? Negative numbers, number properties, decimals, division 1, division 2, partial quotient division. There's a whole bunch of them here. This is only a small little slice. And now what Khan is doing, since he's gotten some money from Bill Gates, is he's saying, well, you know what? I'm going to make little quizzes after these videos. These are 10-minute videos that you just sit and watch, and he just is on the screen just saying, so if you take the polynomial, and he's got this like really kind of interesting what is, but he goes through these lessons, and then there's a quiz. And if you get a question, it's so good. If you get a question wrong in the quiz, it points you right back to the exact minute and second of video that you need to review. So once you pass the quiz, then you get a badge. Interesting. So the deal is that basically you start collecting badges at Khan. Now, 2 points that I want to make about this. Number 1, and I mean this sincerely, if the goal of learning algebra is to pass a test, I can do it without school right now. I don't need to come to your school to learn algebra well enough to pass a test anymore. If it's about the Gupta Empire, I can do all that on my own, right? That's number one. Number two, however, and this is what I think is even more interesting, there are lots of people now who are looking at this and going, well, if we could just make this a little bit more rigorous, and maybe just a little bit more, that we could see a little bit more work there, maybe we can just say, you got 23 badges at Con. You've got an education. Kind of interesting, right? Pretty much. Even, and this is happening at higher ed too. Western Governors University. You want to get a bachelor's degree, you can get one in like 2 months at Western Governors University because all they basically do is you sign up for a course, they give you the test. If you pass the test, you pass the course. And you take enough tests, you pass enough tests, in 3 months you can have a bachelor's degree. And I think they're moving on to master's degrees now. So don't miss the point of what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not making any value judgment on it. I'm simply saying this is the way the world looks like right now. When you have abundant access to all sorts of stuff that people are creating, varying degrees of quality, I get it, varying degrees of rigor and whatever else, but if it's about passing a test, I don't need to send my kid to your school to learn algebra, or French, or U.S. history. If it's about passing a test, I don't want it to be about passing a test. I think that's where our problem is right now. Everything is now about passing the test. And it's not just about kids passing a test, now it's about evaluating teachers 50% based on the scores that their kids get on the test. What a stupid idea that is. And it's about giving schools a grade, A, B, C, D, F, based on how their kids pass the test. And now it's about pre-service programs at colleges getting a grade based on their pre-service teachers going out in the real world 3 years down the road and looking at the test scores those kids get. As if you can somehow connect those dots and give the University of Wisconsin Education Department a C because their graduates' kids 3 years down the road didn't do so great on the test. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's gone off the rails, right? But this is where we're at. If all the emphasis is on passing a test, we really need to start asking the question, well, why school? Why school? What is the value of school if I can send my kid to Khan Academy and pass the test? Now, again, there's a discussion in there, but obviously I'm trying to provoke you, right? I've looked at some of your faces. I'm doing a really good job. Teachers are everywhere, right? So let's say I'm having trouble with that algebra problem, and I can't figure it out from Khan. Well, I can take my phone out, fire up my Motuto app, log in, and say, I'm having trouble with this algebra problem. Can you help me? And someone in Motuto land will text me back and say, sure, let me see what the problem is. So I take my phone and I take a picture of the problem, and I send it to the tutor in Motuto land, who then looks at it and says, oh, I can help you with that. And so we spend a little bit of time with a text chat on the left-hand side of my iPhone and a whiteboard on the right-hand side of my iPhone, and we go through and we solve the problem together. So teachers are everywhere if I need help at any given moment. In fact, I talked to a guy who is an educator / businessman in India, and he said that there are people over in India right now who are becoming just incredibly rich on the backs of American parents who want AP tutoring 24/7, 365. So basically, you don't need to be, and I'm sure that's happening in other places too, I just happen to be speaking to him, but you don't need to have a teacher in a physical space any longer. Teachers are everywhere. If you know how to find them, if you know how to figure out who they are. And they can be formal teachers, they can be informal teachers. And look, I don't want to get political, but Mitt Romney and others have said, why shouldn't we give kids access to the best teachers in the world? But that is defined as, why shouldn't we get the best teachers in the world to create these amazing videos and then let kids learn from those videos and take these types of tests and do this type of thing? Yeah, okay. If the object is to pass the test, that's a much more efficient, much cheaper, many less fewer headaches doing it that way than it is actually running schools and dealing with unions and all that other stuff that happens in schools right now. And so that option is becoming a very attractive option to a lot of people right now in politics and business. And here it is, degree scores your lifelong education. I love it, right? And this is the first one. And next year there will be 5 of these. And 2 years from now there will be a dozen of these that will be asking you, well, give me what you've done and let's see what it's worth, basically. Let's see if we can give you a certificate or a badge or a degree even. So, today, lots of different paths to an education. We cannot simply define an education as going to college and getting a degree, especially for kids who are in basically your kindergarten and first grade class. Can you even imagine what it's going to be like in 12 years? Can you even imagine the possibilities, the access that they'll have to people and stuff? And then the different ways that they can begin to cobble together something that someone absolutely will define or will credit as an education. There are going to be lots of different pathways to this. And again, we can have a conversation as to whether or not it's good or bad. I'm just telling you, it's different, and we have to prepare for it. It's a consequence of abundance. It's a consequence of this moment of having access, this exploding moment that we're in right now. So, I'm not sure I want my kids to be college ready or career ready. I know, blasphemy, right? I want them to be learning ready. Because if they're learning ready, they can take care of whatever path they go on. It's going to be college for a lot of kids, absolutely. It's still going to be college. Colleges aren't going to go away in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Some of them are, without question, some of them are. But college is still going to be a viable option for those kids who are in kindergarten and first grade. My point is, however, there are going to be whole bunches of other ways. And so if we're just making kids college ready, I don't know that we're preparing every kid for those options. If we make them learning ready, I think they're absolutely prepared for whatever path they take. And that's a not so subtle shift in the way that we think about what happens in this space. Right? It challenges the idea of school, last but not least. So I want you to imagine that this picture represents everything there is to know in the world now. Everything that I have access to using technology is represented in this picture. Okay? And now I want you to look at school. Right? You take what content is covered in the 12 years that kids go to school, and you try to even compare it to the potential content that they could be covering. I mean, imagine going into a library with all that stuff. Just imagine walking into that place and looking at it and going, oh my God, look at all this stuff. And then having someone come up to you and say, it's beautiful, isn't it? You can only use the first 2 shelves on that one stack up on the 2nd floor. That's all you have access to when you're in here. It's ridiculous, right? Now, again, I'm not saying we throw all that content out. But do we not need to have a conversation as to what content we have kids learn? What do kids need to know right now? Does every child need physics? Does every child need calculus? Does every child need everything that we're making every child get in school? The answer is no. That's an easy one. It's no. Not every child needs everything. 5% of people go into STEM careers. Yet 100% of kids take tons of STEM stuff. And I get why we did it. I understand that. But now, we have a different question, I think. And that is, what do kids really need to know in order to make sense of this? And take advantage of this? Because if they can take advantage of this, then they can learn anything they want right now. They can learn anything they want. And that's a really cool thing. That's a really cool thing. Now, don't forget though, when you add on now all these people and all this social stuff, it's not just the library, it's not just the knowledge, but it's all that stuff. Now school looks really smart. Now school gets even really tiny. And I love this quote by Thomas Edison, and he's absolutely right. We absolutely don't know anything about anything, except we absolutely know what kids need to get in their K-12 education. Oh, the irony. Look, this is a really hard one. I get it. And it's not one that is going to change on a state or national level anytime soon. I get it. Right? But we have to talk about this. In my perfect schooling world, I really believe that kids by 8th grade can get pretty much all of the basic stuff that they need to know to function in the world. Enough math, enough reading and writing literacy, enough history for context, enough science to understand how the world works, a sense of who they are, how their physical bodies work, all that stuff that we need to function in the world successfully, 8th grade. Wouldn't it be cool if high school was just a deep dive for kids to pursue the things that they really loved and they really cared about and they could really make a difference in the world, instead of them having them sit in classes that they have no interest in, that they have no passion for, that the only reason they're in that classroom is to check the box for some college record or some transcript that says that means they're educated. It's silly. It's silly. Studies have shown, with AP courses especially, You bring AP kids back 3 years after they take the AP test, they don't even come close to passing it. Because the only reason they're learning that stuff for most of them is to get credit in college, is to move, toward that goal. So, look, I'm sorry, I get why we did it. I get it. When content was scarce, when teachers were scarce, we said, if you don't know math, if you don't get physics in high school, you're not going to get it anywhere else. So you better get it here. Or if you don't get U.S. history, or if you don't get, you know what I'm saying, if you don't learn French. Not true anymore. It's not true anymore. And so we have to have a conversation that says, okay, well, what do we do here now? And again, you may be hearing me say to get rid of schools. I'm not saying that at all. I think schools are crucial to our society. Crucial. I want kids in places where they have adults who care about them, who are really inspiring them, who are helping them become learners. I absolutely want that, but I do not want kids going to schools and having the experience that they're having now, where 75% or 80% of it, when my kids come home, they're just like, oh, come on, when is this going to end? I'll give you an example. My son Tucker, Minecraft. Any Minecraft parents? Yeah, okay, so here's another group support. So you haven't heard of Minecraft. It's not even really a game. It's this computer program where you go in and you just kind of make things, and it's really kind of this whole kind of Lego-y thing. You can see this, right? So you build houses and you build roller coasters, and you build meadows and lakes and sheep and cows. It's this kind of interesting, very non-violent but very creative place, right? Which is really cool. So Tucker had been just killing me to get on Minecraft. And finally in January when it was snowing outside and he was dribbling the basketball through the house and kicking the dog, and it's just like, okay, fine, let's do Minecraft. And he was like, Minecraft. So I got on Minecraft, and I said, we just started up, and my wife and I had to run out for a couple errands, and I said, Tuck, I'll be back in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Just, try to figure it out, and when I get back, we'll roll up our sleeves, we'll really dive in, we'll really figure it out together. Well, I came home an hour and a half later. He already built a house. He had this skyway thing going on. He was mining for iridium or something, whatever it was. And I was like, how did you do that? And so I looked on the history. He showed me too. He'd watched first thing he did, 6 YouTube videos. Right after that, as soon as I did 6 YouTube videos, how to get through the first night in Minecraft, right? By some guy, I had no idea who he was. But the videos were really good, so he was. And then, any of you know Ubu? Have you heard of Ubu? It's kind of like a Skype, Google Hangout type of thing, right? So you can get all these multi-pane video calls going. He Ubu'd his 5 friends who already play Minecraft, and by the time I got home, they were all together on the same server, building stuff, and they were literally leading him through the whole process of building it, right? He wasn't going to wait, you think he was going to sit there in front of the computer and wait for an hour and a half till I got back? No. Now imagine how you would have learned Minecraft in school. Right? Here's a Minecraft book. Read chapter 1 tonight. Go home and make a tree. And tomorrow when you come in, we'll all look at the tree, and I have a rubric for the tree. Right? And then we're going to test on the tree. That's not the way the world works for him any longer. And so when he does go into an environment like that, he sits here and goes, "Why are you doing this?" Right? I never said, why are you doing this to me? Because I didn't know any better. I didn't have any other options. But now, our kids have options. And more and more, they're looking at it and just kind of going, the school thing just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, they're doing it. They're good kids. They want to be responsible, And it's so hard for my wife and I not to fall into that typical, parent thing. Did you have any tests today? What were your grades? You got your interim? I mean, I'm as laid back as I can be about grades and stuff, but I still fall into that expectation thing because, that's the way the kind of school thing works. But anyway, this is Ubu. There's my geeky son in the bottom right. And, there's almost a day doesn't go by where he's not chatting with his friends and they're online doing something. It's not like they're just doing this social thing, but they're online and they're chatting at the same time and they're working stuff out. This is, by the way, homework 101 right now. My son, when math homework, every night that he has math homework, basically, it's not, it wasn't happening here, but, the guy up on the left takes 1 through 3, the girl in the center takes 4 through 6, right? And they just all do their math homework, and then they just share it out, and they're done. And it's a lot faster, it's a lot more efficient, and to be honest with you, I have a real problem standing over and going, you can't do that. I mean, There's a place, Slater. Go to slater.com. Every problem in every math book is on that site, the answers to every problem. And kids are posting the answers. So, we got to figure out a different way. That's my point. We got to figure out a different way of doing it. Twitter's the same thing. And this is that, this is learning happens in networks right now. If you don't have a network to learn with, you're not going to be as powerful a learner as someone who does. I am, amazed that I have over 30,000 people following me on Twitter. One of them in the front row over here. But are you tweeting this? You're not tweeting, right? No. But you think I do a lot of Google searches anymore? You think if I'm looking for a great example of a third grade class using wikis that I go on Google? No, I go to Twitter. My network gives me answers. And then it's not just giving me answers, it's also that they engage in some conversations around that. And Twitter conversations are really hard. How many of you have a Twitter account that you use? Yeah, so, and a lot of people think of Twitter and they go, isn't that just where, like, Lindsay Lohan tweets out and she gets arrested again? It's silly, it's stupid, and it's inane, except if you know what you're doing with it. And I'll tell you right now that 90% of the people who I interact with online in my network will tell you Twitter is the #1 professional development tool that they have in their lives right now. It's a powerful, powerful tool if you know what you're doing with it. If you're following really good people on Twitter, it's amazing. It's really cool. But that's what a network is. And learning happens in networks now. Learning doesn't happen in classrooms. Learning happens in networks. The classroom is this kind of false construct of learning any longer. It's this four-walled thing that, happens in isolation. When learning now happens all over the place, any time of day, anywhere you have access, with people from around the world who share your passions and interests, it's a lot different from what happens in classrooms. So this is my LinkedIn network. And you have LinkedIn on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is more of kind of a professional place where people, I have 3 friends who are doing startups in San Francisco right now who have hired every one of the people they've hired on LinkedIn. And not even posted a job. They have looked for people who fit the qualifications, who have experiences, who have the resume, who have the portfolio, and then reached out to them and said, hey, I got this new company. You look like you'd be a perfect fit. And more times than not, people go, well, that's kind of interesting. Let's talk about it. Let's see it. So that's me in the middle, and these are, my educator friends, and some here are my business friends, and these are my college friends, or I've got some trying to fly a plane, so those people are here, So, it's just, I'm learning with these people all the time. And again, I'll go back to that point that I made. If you took all the stranger dots off of this image, I don't know what I would do. Seriously, I don't know what I would do. 99.99% of these dots I've never met. But yet, I interact with them on a fairly regular basis, and I learn a lot through those interactions. That's the way of the world. And we can do this anywhere now. And this picture is scary on a lot of different levels. That's certainly not the way to have a nice quiet dinner with your wife or your significant other or whatever else. But it does suggest, doesn't it? This is the way of the world. And now we have this mini, right? The mini iPad coming out. It's not something that just happens between 8 and 2:30, Monday through Friday, September through June. That's crazy. In a classroom with everybody your same age. And you're only taking one subject at a time. It's all of that is being challenged right now. All of that we have to look at and say, does this really make sense to do it this way anymore? And I know those are huge questions that are going to take lots of time to kind of look at and answer, but those are the questions we have to ask. I love this too, by the way, and I just want to make this point. Ever see a 4-year-old get an iPad? It's an amazing thing, isn't it? And I guarantee you the first words out of that child's mouth are not, this is so cool, when's the workshop? Yet, you give an iPad to certain adults, and it's like you've given them, I don't know, uranium or something, right? And you're looking at it, they're kind of like, well, what do I do? What do I do? We have to figure out ways of moving cultures in schools to be more playful like kids, who just start tapping icons and start hacking it and start figuring it out. Because that's absolutely what learning looks like right now. If you're in the real world waiting for someone to deliver an education to you, you're going to be waiting a long time. Anyway. So it's not about content mastery, it's about learning mastery. It really is. And, you know, the assessments are just not where we're at right now with this. I get that. But we're kind of thinking about it differently. And here's kind of the quote that I just gave you. But we need to move beyond the idea that education is something that's provided for us and toward the idea that education is something we create for ourselves because we can. And kids can. And so the question is, are you preparing kids to learn to create their own education? I mean, what a concept. How cool is that? But also, how daunting is that for the way we think about schools? So it absolutely changes the rules. There's no competitive advantage to knowing the person next to you. The world doesn't care what you know. The world cares what you can do with what you know. Yet, in schools and state assessments, we just get what you know. Pretty much. So, what do we want our students to learn? And this is a really important question. And I was asking Lori this because, you know, they were talking about the vision that they have for teaching and learning. And I'm always interested to hear what those visions are. Right? So if I asked you guys what learning is, I mean, most of you would come up with stuff like this. Yeah, learning is really seeing patterns, and it's finding and solving problems, and it's synthesizing ideas, and it's doing all that good stuff. And yeah, it is somewhat acquiring knowledge, and you know that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here that I think is really, really important. And I'm going to argue in a second. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff on this list that's more important than the stuff we're actually defining as learning right now in schools. So here's the test. Which of those do we assess, though, right? And there are only pretty much two that we assess. And if we really believe that learning is all that stuff, but we're only assessing those two things, then we really don't have a clue whether or not our kids are learning anything. I mean, we know whether or not they know the dates of the Civil War, and that's good, and we know that they have some, maybe, and the Common Core probably is going to do a little bit more to make it, you know, to have kids apply that knowledge in ways and to, you know, really do some interesting stuff with it, but at the end of the day, I think the Common Core is going to be subverted by this whole idea that we're still assessing teachers with 50% of their evaluations based on test scores, and I don't know how you're going to make an assessment that is not quantitative if you're going to kind of pile all that stuff on top of it. So, you know, we define school as where we get an education, and an education is defined by what we assess. And if we don't assess what we value, we end up valuing what we assess. And welcome to education in the United States in the 21st century. Here we are. That stuff is hard. That creativity, solving problems, making connections, all that stuff, that's hard to assess, isn't it? It's difficult. So let's just assess the stuff that's easy, and then we'll really value that. We'll just add all sorts of high stakes to that stuff because we know what's happening there. We can quantify that part of it. But that has some real problems for our kids. This is a really bad graph that I created. And trying to just kind of get the idea, you know. So in learning in a time of abundance, what's more important, less important, what's easier and harder, right? So this stuff, content knowledge, is probably not as important anymore. But yet it's really easy to measure, isn't it? And basic skills, critical thinking, these get, you know, somewhat more important, and you can begin to assess this stuff. IBM surveyed 1,500 CEOs from around the world 2 years ago and asked them, what's the number one thing that people need in order to be successful? What's the number one quality? What's the number one, you know, attribute, skill, whatever else? And it's shocking, I know, but they didn't say great test scores. They said creativity. Creativity is the number one thing that people need right now in order to, I love this, navigate an increasingly complex world. No amount of content knowledge is going to help you navigate an increasingly complex world. But if you have creativity, if you have a lot of those dispositions, then it becomes kind of interesting. So yeah, curiosity and courage and entrepreneurial thinking, this E word is just everywhere now. Everywhere. We want entrepreneurial kids. We want entrepreneurial thinkers. Entrepreneurial this, right? Innovators. All that. And yeah, we do. We absolutely do. But I don't know that we're sure about what we're talking about yet, you know, in that. So yeah, this stuff over here, more important. Harder to assess. And I love this quote by Justin Wright. We're optimizing the measurable, that stuff in the bottom left, at the risk of neglecting the immeasurable, that stuff at the bottom right. And he's absolutely right. And this is a great book titled Abundance by Peter Diamandis. And he says, teaching kids how to nurse their creativity and curiosity while still providing a solid foundation in critical thinking, literacy, and math is the best way to prepare them for a future of increasingly rapid technological change. Yet anyone have an assessment for creativity, curiosity, problem solving, entrepreneurial thinking? Is that on the state test anywhere? Is that on the Common Core anywhere? It's not, by and large. It's not. So I'm here to tell you the immeasurable stuff up here. This is what I want to know about my children right now. This is what I want to know. Can they do this stuff? Because if they can do this stuff, I think this stuff kind of takes care of itself, to be honest with you. So we need to be unlearners and relearners. And I'm almost done here so we can have a little bit of a conversation. But this is absolutely true, and it's absolutely true about educators too, by the way. You know, educators cannot get a pass in terms of being unlearners and relearners. You guys would never keep a family physician who's not an unlearner, would you? You never would. You'd never take your child to someone who's operating on 5-year-old medical knowledge, even. Right? And, you know, I'm not hating on teachers here. I'm not. But teachers have to step up right now, too. We as educators have to step up, and we need to be supported in that, and we need to, but we cannot accept traditional practice that's been going on for a long, long time any longer. And we have to ask for more. And I think it's reasonable to do that, but we have to figure out what that looks like, too. So this isn't change. This isn't giving everyone an iPad and calling it a day. That's not what we're talking about here, right? Because you can do just as bad a job of delivering the curriculum on an iPad as you can on pencil and paper, right? And I go to schools all the time that have spent $1 bajillion on new technology and nothing has changed. Because all they're trying to do is digitize their old curriculum. They're not trying to rethink their old curriculum and make it more relevant for the world that exists right now. This is about really big area change. Now, it's not easy, and it starts with us, and I'm going to give you just a couple suggestions for starting points that, you know, where I think we need to take this. And hopefully, you know, best case scenario, this is the start of a conversation in this district with you guys, that you guys connect somehow and keep this conversation going, and really ask these questions. And it takes time. This is not something that you have, you know, you're not going to figure this out in the next 2 months or 3 months. It's going to take a year or more to just talk about it. But first thing you got to do is you got to get up to speed. You have to figure this out. You have to find your own path into this conversation and into your own understanding of how the world is changing right now. Please don't take my word for it. Okay? I am one opinion, one vision, one lens, or one version. It's not even a vision. One version of what the world looks like right now. And not that these vary a lot, but they vary somewhat. I mean, but I don't think there's any question that, you know, this shift is happening, and we have to figure it out. And I would humbly suggest for $2.99, that might not be a bad starting point either. If you want to see how teachers, you know, do it, or what it's about for teachers, I mean, there are lots of examples now of classroom teachers from around the world who are doing amazing inquiry-based, project-based types of you know, learning in their classrooms where kids have ownership over it. They are creating real things for real audiences, publishing those things, changing the world, even in elementary school, doing real stuff. One of the things that drove me nuts when my kids were in elementary school was this thing called the Friday folder. Anyone know the Friday folder? It just drove me absolutely insane how much paper they would bring home. And I would have to sign some of it on Monday morning as the bus was screeching to a halt. And, you know, I was signing. And that signed stuff would come back the next week because this was just this like paper passing exercise that we were having. But we decided when my kids were in 3rd and 5th grade, we saved every piece of paper that came home in the Friday folder. And it was 2.5 feet tall at the end of the year. 2.5 feet tall paper. And guess how many times my kids looked at any of that paper? Not once. They had no investment at all in it. That stuff, all that work that they did, was just doing school. That was the doing school pile. That's pretty much all it was. 2nd graders can now create things and publish them and interact and collaborate with other people around the world to change the world, to add to the knowledge base. Why wouldn't we be doing that? Why wouldn't we be doing that? Why wouldn't we be engaging them in authentic work for real audiences? We can absolutely keep 2nd graders safe. Absolutely. So it's not a safety thing. We can't say, well, you know, the internet's a bad place. No. That doesn't work. Because we get tens of thousands of kids are participating, creating, sharing, and they are extremely safe. So that's not it. It's why do we want to do that? Because it represents the real world. It's the kind of thing that they're going to be doing in their lives. So there's no reason why we can't do that. So, but it's hard for teachers, right? And so the intellectual piece, and it's hard for all of us, I shouldn't just say teachers. The intellectual piece, I think we can make the compelling case now. The world is changing. I really do. I think it's hard not to, it's hard to sit and listen or read and say, yeah, I don't think that's happening. It's happening. But the emotional piece of it, that's really hard. And, you know, I go tomorrow when I'm at this school, Lake Mills, yeah. So I'm going to have like 300 people or something tomorrow, teachers, and I know by the end of it, there are going to be a certain number of them who are not going to be very happy with me at all. They're going to be really angry. There are going to be a certain number who are going to be scared to death. There are going to be a certain number who are going to be like, well, I can't wait until tomorrow, or I can't wait until Monday to go and do stuff in my classroom. And then there are going to be others who are going to be really sad. You know, the range of emotions around this are huge, and we have to deal with those emotions. Everybody comes to this in a different way. So this is Shelley right now. I just love this blog post where she said, you know, she moved from a stand and deliver teacher to an inquiry-based teacher where she was asking really good questions, letting kids really discover those answers. And she said, you know, I wasn't expecting the profound sense of loss and pain accompanying that shift. This is a really difficult thing emotionally to do because what I'm basically asking you to do is rethink the whole thing. I mean, start over. And that's hard, because what are our roles in that? What are teachers' roles in that now? What are classrooms for? What do we do in school? It's a really hard, big conversation. But the cool thing is that there's so many teachers like Shelley now where you can look at her classroom and you can go, yeah, that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. You know? You don't have to reinvent it. It's out there. And I know a lot of people go, well, how do we do that and still pass the test? That's the other question that everybody kind of runs up against. They're going, yeah, this is great, but how they got... The two are not mutually exclusive. They're not. You just have to think differently about it. You have to see it differently. Again, there are thousands and thousands of kids who are in inquiry-based classrooms doing real work for real audiences, not doing paper worksheets or iPad worksheets, and still passing the test. They're not mutually exclusive. You just have to trust it. You got to build a network. If you're not on Twitter, go get on Twitter. Seriously, parents, get on Twitter. Find other people who share a passion for whatever it is you have a passion for. Whether that's the Milwaukee Brewers or fly fishing or, you know, whatever. Politics. There are so many people out there who are filtering the world and sharing the world for you. You'd be amazed how much you could learn. And look, there's nothing stopping anyone in this room or any teacher at this school from learning any tool that he or she wants to learn at any moment that you want to learn. It's called YouTube, right? You want to learn Twitter? Go to YouTube, Twitter tutorial. You'll get thousands of videos. And then you look to see which ones are the most watched. And, you know, you can do this on your own. And then I think we really need to provoke. We really do. We have a responsibility right now, I think, if we see the world differently and if we feel that the world is a changing place and that our kids are going to be expected to do things that we're not preparing them for, we have to stand up and go, hey, we need to change this. We can't do assessments like this any longer. These assessments are not helping any longer. In fact, now they're to the point where they're really hurting. I can tell you stories. A friend of mine, her third grader came home on testing day, New Jersey Ask in third grade, came home crying. And it was because she didn't feel like she'd done a great job on the test, but it wasn't because she felt bad about doing bad on the test, it was because she felt bad about putting her teacher's job at risk. That's insane. It's insane. And we have to stand up and say, this is stupid. We need to rethink it. So we have a role in this, and it starts with us, and it starts with our ability to understand that being learned is not going to cut it any longer. We need to be learners now. We really need to be learners who can take advantage of everything that we have at this moment that didn't exist even 10, 15 years ago. And, you know, I know that this is a big concept or a big change that's happening. And for a lot of teachers, they look at it and they go, this isn't what I signed up for. You know, wait, I signed up for teaching the way it was. Well, welcome to it. We happen to be parenting and teaching and going to school at this one moment of huge change. We'll be done with this in 20 years. We'll have figured it out. And we weren't talking about it 20 years ago. But right now, welcome to it. Sorry. Don't kill the messenger. Right? But welcome to it. We're in it. And so we have to figure it out. And my biggest fear is that people who don't have a real vested interest in kids' educations are figuring it out for us. And they're being motivated by things now that I don't think help us in terms of parents or teachers or educators. That's my opinion. So I appreciate you listening to that. I went a little bit longer than I thought I was going to. But we have about half an hour or so to just kind of have a conversation or to throw things at me or whatever it is that you want to do.
First.
Sure. All right, thank you. Questions? Yeah.
Obviously, our kids
it's like I said, I think first you have to make that compelling intellectual case. And I really don't think it's that hard. I mean, well, I don't know that anyone's going to raise his or her hand if I ask the question. Any of you disagree with me that the world is changing? I mean, right? I mean, I don't think you can, and like I said, I don't know the answers, but I think I'm asking the right questions. I think I'm painting the picture pretty accurately. So I don't think you're going to walk out of here tonight going, no, he's full of it, right? But it's the, okay, so what do we do about it part that is the hard part. And that's only going to come, and I've done professional development, that professional development company that we've been doing, we've worked with like 7,000 people in 6 different countries, and it's a unique way that we do it. But I will tell you, nothing, we tell those teachers when we first, because we have them for 8 months out of the year, we do a couple lanes of face-to-face and virtual stuff. But we tell the teachers at the very beginning, we say, stop thinking about your schools, stop thinking about your classrooms, stop thinking about your kids, and only think about yourself. Be selfish in this professional development and only focus on yourselves as learners. Because until you experience what learning looks like now for yourself, it's extremely difficult to make sense of it in your classroom. It's extremely difficult for you to have conversations about it. So, I mean, there are lots of districts right now. One of my favorite superintendents up in Dobbs Ferry, New York, Lisa Brady. I mean, she's got 200 parents doing a book study of Tony Wagner's The Global Achievement Gap. And now, my $2.99 book. But the point is, they're engaged. They're engaged. And there's not a one of them in that group that's going, let's just keep it the way it is. They're asking the big questions. They're going, okay, so what do we do? First thing they did was they all got together, signed a petition, sent it to the state, and said enough testing, enough practice tests, enough testing junk. And I mean, it's a small voice in the wilderness right now, but there are principals and superintendents in New York that are starting to advocate for that cause. But look, once you understand it, once you kind of grasp what's happening, it's a lot easier than to go and advocate for change. And it's a lot easier than to raise the question. And if you're an educator, you can't go and start changing your classroom until you've changed yourself. I just have come to that conclusion after doing many, many years of blogging workshops and how to do Twitter. And I don't mean to sound patronizing about it, but we shouldn't be doing those workshops anymore. We should be saying to teachers, go learn that stuff on your own, just like my son will learn Minecraft on his own. And then come in and we'll talk about what it means, what changes. What is Twitter, how does Twitter change learning? And it does. So it's got to be about us first. So, I mean, I wrote a blog post that just went up in Huffington Post today, but it said basically, I'll give a pass to people who didn't know that this was happening, but now you know. So you got a year. Change. I'm sorry. I mean, you have to change. Parent, teacher, whatever else. You got to do it. You got to do the work right now. Or you risk, I think, your kids really fully understanding what's possible and how to do it really well. Most of your kids will be fine if this school doesn't change very much or if you don't change very much, right? They'll be okay. But I look at my kids and I go, man, if they really knew what they were doing with this stuff, if they were really creating things and if they were really changing the world, my goodness, what they could do. Oh, where you'll go. What's that Dr. Seuss book? Oh, the places you'll go, right?
What you're calling for, which I agree with, of course, is revolution. And there
but revolution means
very many different ways of looking at it.
I don't want to spill any blood.
Right. No, I'm saying it's the Baraboo Spring. Let's call it that. Okay, the
Baraboo
Spring of education. Because the technology that brought about the shift of how people see the world, the technology about how people see the world is what you're describing our children see and bringing about that change, that every ounce of that society that oppresses that change is opposed to. So, I mean, I use it as a metaphor.
Yeah, and it's a great metaphor.
And what I agree with is it completely rethinking of education. 3 things that you said I want to focus on. One, we have our brick and mortar because we live in a society and a culture that is built on all of our parents working and needing a safe place for our children. You identify our children, if our children are safe, we as parents can go into the world and have a level of comfort. And that's our primary responsibility, whether we know it or not, is to provide a safe place for our children. I've spoken before about the fact that today, more than ever, schools in loco parentis means everything. We have to feed our children that are not fed. We have to clothe our children that are not fed, as well as educate our children. And we have to take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune of political situations that are attacking teachers, administrators, and schools day in and day out. I'm a child of the 60s. We fought that battle. We fought that battle when we were told in Berkeley we couldn't speak, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. So I come from a tradition that says major social change needs to be brought around. And I agree, nonviolently. I am a nonviolent person. It has to be brought around by some kind of small revolution. Safety for our children. Culture. We have to resist the culture. 99% of the technology out there is to keep people occupied with play and entertainment so they do not waken to what is going on in the world around them. With all the technology going on, I have great hope and optimism that our children, with this technology, are learning the things that, unfortunately, generations before them have not learned. How to live together in peace, how to share the resources of the world, and how to create that which doesn't exist so that everyone can be educated in a way that allows their passion and their bliss to lead them down the paths to understand what this brief human life is all about. I would love to see a bearable spring. I'm going to say one more thing. We're talking about a facilities plan, right? We don't want to expand what is. We want to change to what could be. And for me, as one of your board members, that means spaces that provide safety for our children, with you, adults that care about children, know how to nurture their passions and to use that passion as the vehicle for education. Our responsibility as adults and teachers, as far as I'm concerned, is discernment. Because if they can get all the information in the world, how do they know what information is truly meaningful and valuable? And the biggest problem we have on the internet is people find the information they want. Oh, you know, these are the people I listen to. Everybody else, they're not in my caress. We have to break those down.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right too. You know, I think that's one of the reasons actually why we've become so polarized. You know, it's getting very hard to get outside of your own echo chamber. There's another piece of it too. You know, and you're right. It's about discernment, but it's also about attention. How do we help kids focus? You know, there's a guy, Howard Rheingold, who wrote a book, Net Smarts, who talks about attention literacy, mindful learning. That I think he's absolutely right. And those are the types of things we have to focus on with our kids. Those are the types of skills and dispositions that they really need to flourish. So yeah, I hear you. I like that very spring thing.
Yeah, Peter, I'm sorry, I missed most of the 60s, so I wasn't. But your comment about online reputation really kind of struck home, because I understand where you're coming from. We have a girl in a neighboring district in Reedsburg by the name of Jordan Shara, and when she was younger, she did some great things about collecting needles and drugs and getting them out of the community and things like that. She started building that online reputation, and all of a sudden articles are being written about her, and she's being interviewed, she's being brought to be in this parade, and she's all of a sudden at the school district speaking, and lo and behold, she gets to carry the Olympic torch in London because people are looking online for that type of person. My question is, you had asked, or you had said that if the district is not part of helping create or understand that online reputation or that online
Well, I think it's something that, you know, you build toward K through 12, and I'm not suggesting that we have kids in elementary school and middle school and put stuff up there with their full names, but, you know, juniors and seniors in high school, yeah, I think that's about the right time to begin helping them create a real presence of who they are and the things that they care about. It could be blogs, it could be videos, I mean, whatever kids want to make. It could be, you know, those types of things. The interesting thing, and I've read a couple actually stories about kids like that, and it's always interesting to me that they're usually done outside of school. Nothing to do with school, you know. Wouldn't it be great if that was school? If those types of projects and those types of I think that the reason I stopped was because I just remembered I'm reading this just amazingly good book that I'm going to blog about and recommend to everybody. It's a book by Susie Boss, and it's about doing projects and doing real inquiry work in classrooms. And in the context of doing that, letting kids really own those types of ideas and attach their names to it, you know. And so we need to teach young kids about safety, and we need to teach young kids about the ethics of being online, but we also need to be modeling our own transparency for those kids. I mean, I think every teacher should be Googled, you know, should be Googleable, if that's a word. And again, the more that we understand it, the more that we can make sense of it for our kids. So it's a, you know, we ratchet it up, we scaffold it up, just like anything else. It's a part of literacy, so that when kids are ready to leave us, they have a really decent portfolio online that they can be proud of and we can be proud of, and we know that at least they have a knowledge of what that looks like. I don't know if that helps, if that's as specific as you wanted, but I mean, you know, real work, whatever that is, whatever that looks like, real work. I mean, there's tons of real work to do in the world, you know, and kids can do a lot. That's Dewey. I mean, I think Dewey would be doing Hansford, you know, with the potentials at least of making school authentic.
As a leader in our school district and as a person who wants to be a leader in some of this change and sees how important it is, how can we get those people who just don't, or are so scared, or so don't want to make this change, don't want to step into it, how can we help them get there without causing friction?
Well, there's a lot of theories, obviously, on how to do that. I think what you do is you start with the people who are most willing and accepting, and you use them as the pilots, and you as the bright lights. There's a great book called Switch by the Heath brothers where they talk about bright lights, you know, and you use those people to highlight what's possible, and you show that stuff to the rest of the staff. You constantly put that in front of them, and you'll get then another segment of people who will come along without too much resistance, and they can become a part of that movement and that change. But you're always going to have people who are going to be really, really tough to move, and this is where it gets hard, you know. I really think that you try as much as you can to take really small steps with those people and to help them and to nurture them and make sure they know that they matter as people, that we're not changing what they do or the relationships they have with kids. We're just asking them to do it differently. But at the end of the day, you know, there's a difference between, I think a lot of people look at technology and they are scared to use it in the classroom because A, they don't know it, or they think it'll go wrong, or kids will get, you know, connected with somebody or whatever else. I think we have to make the culture that if you're not using technology in the classroom, if you're not using technology in the classroom, that's a problem. That's the problem, you know, a problem. And so it has to be part of evaluation, and it has to be, you know, this is one thing that I need you to do this year, you know, one thing that we can agree on that you will try in your classrooms. And we have this support, and we have this support, and we can, you know, help you get to that point. But you're not going to get everybody. And then it just becomes a question of how do you deal with those people who are just really stubborn. Some of them, you wait them out, they'll retire. Others, you gently kind of move them out, you know. I mean, I've seen it done both ways. But it's got to be a culture that says we just cannot accept teachers who do not use technology as part of their own learning practice, because you're professionals, and your professional duty right now is to really understand this and make sense of it. And I know it's hard, but yeah.
Well, I think it starts though with creating a revision of, you know, I mean, it's a unified vision, I think, to value the
Consensus would be great, you know.
But, or even, you know, as a district to say, this is something we're embracing revisioning what it is that we really value. It starts there, I think.
It does, and it's the same thing. I mean, I think districts that start today to really change in meaningful ways and to really want to get to a different place where, at the end of the process, technology is just, as my friend Chris says, like oxygen, right? It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Where what's happening in classrooms is kids are asking really big questions that no one knows the answers to, and they're trying to figure out those answers together. Where the work that they're creating has a real purpose in the world, that other people can see it and other people can use it, and where kids are absolutely connected to other teachers and other learners outside the classroom. I mean, that's the vision, right? That's kind of, if I was to start a school, that's a lot of what my vision would be. That's a 7-year process. That's a 10-year process maybe. And it's hard to look that far down the road. But if you don't have that vision to benchmark every decision you make against, then you've got a problem, because then you're going to go this way for a while, and then you're going to shift and go this way for a while, and then you're going to go that way. You know what I'm saying? That vision of what you want teaching and learning to look like in the classroom is absolutely crucial. And that has to be somewhat of a consensus. You're never going to get 100% of people to kind of agree with that vision. But again, I think that there are schools out there right now who are models of that you're doing both. You're passing the test. You're still getting the good scores, on the test and whatever else, but you're also doing all that really important stuff that no one's testing for, that no one's asking you for, but that as educators you have to do for kids now. So it's really hard. But, the first move in that is not to buy 500 iPads. And that's what a lot of schools do. A lot of schools say, well, we got to get iPads. And then they go, well, now what do we do? And usually what ends up happening is they use iPads as really, really expensive paper and pen. Because they have no vision for it. They don't understand it. I wouldn't be buying a lot of iPads anyway, but that's just me. Right? I would definitely be buying laptops for kids. Because I want kids to create big stuff. And right now, the iPad to me is very limiting in terms of creating big stuff. Maybe we'll get there. But anyway. Yeah.
Which accepting it across all the 50 states, which state do you think is most tech-friendly or accepting this change, embracing this change?
State?
Yeah.
None of them. I don't think there's one that stands out. Look, there are lots of classrooms, lots and lots and lots of classrooms. Most of them are islands in their schools, though, right? Most of them, it's not a systemic type of thing. There are a handful of schools that everybody's on that train, and they're all moving in the right direction, and they're doing amazing stuff in their classrooms. But there's no kind of connected dots or there's no leadership that I know of at any state house right now that's advocating for that kind of change. Because the problem with politics right now is that it's so dependent on money and it's so infused with money that the people who've got the money now are basically setting the policy. And that's not a hard equation to come up with. Businesses, there are literally thousands of businesses right now that are looking at education and just salivating over how much money they could make by personalizing education, right? By digitizing education. Pearson is just, they are just so happy right now because there's just so much content and so much professional development and so much stuff around the Common Core. You get my point. So the policies that are being made in the state houses just in many ways are like the policies being made in Washington, D.C. They're driven a lot by lobbyists and a lot by money and a lot by what certain people with influence want. And that's a bigger problem than I think most of us realize, probably bigger than what even I realize. But that's the nature of the game right now. So there isn't a state. I can give you states that are really screwing it up, but I can't give you states that are, forward thinking on a statewide level.
Well, that's the wire that we walk, and sort of reaching that balance point between focusing on reculturing how we teach and learn versus meeting some benchmark standard. On Monday we had our state report cards come out, and that's the accountable measure that ultimately I'm going to be
And well is defined as good test scores?
We have, defined by a number of variables, but each of our elementary schools exceeded expectations.
On a test?
Yeah. And the middle school and high school met expectations closely.
But I would also add that so much of that is because of the policies
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we have put in place here to support our teachers and to support where we know we've used the technology and the educational philosophy to identify where our kids are, where they're having trouble, and immediately.
Yeah, intervention.
You know, the bigger question is.
Do a lot of RTI stuff,
Yeah, I mean, the bigger question is, if we look around and ask ourselves, what were we like when we were in 4th grade and 5th grade, and how did we become who we are today
But you're
with none of this?
Because you're a child of the 60s.
With
so
none of this.
Listen,
I gotta tell you, Kurt Vonnegut wrote about this in 1950. The same stuff that we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I am willing to make that change, what tool or what would you like to see teachers doing with their students in the classroom? What's one thing that you think that I should take back and I should show everyone in my building what to do?
Nothing. Nothing. You can't do that until you've done it yourself, right? That's my point. I don't want you to do that. Do that in March. You can do that in March. After you've spent 5 months just going deep into your own learning, trying different tools, seeing what works, getting a network, getting connected, learning with other teachers who are trying to figure it out too. Because, your situation is unique. I can't tell you what tool is going to work for you or for other people in your building. Only you can do that. But you can't do that unless you have some context for what that tool is and what it does and what it means in learning, in a learning sense, right? So, I can't, that's a unanswerable question. The only person that can answer that question is you, and the only time you're going to be able to answer that question is after you've done the work. And that's the kind of hard reality that teachers are in right now. There's no silver bullet here.
The few schools that you mentioned that you found to be exceptional
Yeah.
over the course of the last few years, they easily dug up on your
Sure.
information on your.
Well, I can give you a couple names. Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia. The public magnet school that is just an amazing place. I'm going to get you that book because if you want to look at great examples of this type of learning, I think Susie's book is awesome. High Tech High in San Diego, which ironically really isn't much about technology, but is doing just, again, really interesting learning in classrooms. Here's that book, Bridging Innovation to School. I mean, it's just an amazing, it's a great book if you want to see the types of learning that kids can do that's extremely meaningful and powerful. Much of it with technology, some of it without. Yeah, and the other thing is too, I'm not saying that we have to use technology in everything that we do in the classroom, but the idea that we're not using technology for a lot of what we do in the classroom is kind of difficult right now, So, anyway. But there's great examples. Anyone else?
So where does authentic and how do you assess learning in this kind of environment and account for equity and where different students are coming from and what they are
Well, and I was going to say, the equity issue is the other reason we have schools, right? Because in theory, at least, it is what gives us equality. It's supposedly supposed to be the place where kids get equal access to an education, and we all know that that's not the reality. That some kids get a better education than others in public schools. But there are all sorts of issues that go into that, and that's why I think that it's just a very complex and challenging moment right now. I think that in the assessments of doing authentic work, kids have to learn to self-assess. Kids have to find what the value is for themselves too. So that's a part of it. I think that it has to be assessed by peers. I think it has to be assessed by community. It's harder. It takes more time. but it's much, much more valuable, you know? And again, I'm not here to say that we don't do any of those old types of tasks. I think there's a lot of formative assessment that we can do, quick kind of analysis of where our kids are at and the concepts that they know and things like that. But that can't be the end goal. It just can't be the end goal. The end goal has to be, you know, like that Tony Wagner quote, you know, not that you know it, but what can you do with it? What can you do with what you know? How can you show that you really understand this concept and that you've applied it in some interesting, authentic way? It's much harder and takes more time, but, you know, again, I just don't know how we can say no to it, you know? I don't know how we can look at it and go, nah, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, so do one thing in your classroom. If you're a teacher, you know, at some point, do one thing in your classroom that's inquiry-based, that's authentic, where you're having kids publish, where they're collaborating with other kids around the world, where they're, you know, doing real work for real audiences and that stuff. Just do one thing. You don't have to change your whole curriculum. And then next year do 2 things. And then next year do 4 things. You have to multiply that up. And then next year do 8 things.
So what are some of those options that we have? I know that we should be exploring those, but what are some of those things we should be exploring, like
For you?
and wikis?
Just for
and,
you? You as a learner? Or?
Yeah, for me, yeah. If
Okay.
I want to integrate those things into my classroom, where could I?
Well, for you as a learner, start with Twitter, I think.
Okay.
Are you on Twitter?
No, I'm on Facebook, but Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. Follow, just go get a couple videos on, you know, look at YouTube videos on how to do it. It's really easy. There's only a couple things that you really need to know, but one of them is the use of a hashtag, right? The £. And if you just do a search, once you get set up on Twitter, just do a search for #EdChat, EDCHAT. Just start reading that. Just start watching that, okay? And see what people are talking about, and you know, and just kind of connect with them, and you'll find your way.
Okay.
But Twitter's absolutely the easiest and I think a valuable entry point into that whole network learning concept. If you're not learning with people online who are, you know, either interested in the things you are or teaching the things you are, that's a great place to start. Beyond that, then it becomes, you know, well, what tools really help you get literate according to those 6 bullet points, and blogs and wikis, and, you know, YouTube videos and all of that stuff. But there are tools like Evernote from an information standpoint, information literacy standpoint, Google Docs, you know, Google Reader, RSS feeds. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. But I think if you start with Twitter and you kind of, you know, see what people are talking about, kind of engage, follow their links, you know, figure out who they are, go read their blogs, comment on their blogs, you'll figure it out, you know, you'll learn.
Thank you.
So, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope that was helpful. I hope you got my information when it was up there. If you want to get in touch, it's will@richardson.com, pretty easy. But if you have any questions or if you have any other, you know, stuff that you want to share, that would be great. But I hope that was helpful, and good luck with your work.